You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host and bourbon-soaked storyteller, Juliette Miranda.
Well, hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode 146 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. I have two stories for y'all today about red carpet legalities and digging up bones. But first, booze. I'm filling my glass with Rebel Yell ginger whiskey. Cheers, y'all. Ugh. Oh, that was a mistake. This is what I imagine clown sweat to taste like. All right, scratch all that, y'all. I am refilling my glass with anything but ginger whiskey. A very well-meaning friend sent me this bottle, knowing that 1, I love whiskey, and 2, I love drinking whiskey with ginger beer. But this is so not to my taste. I mean, I suppose if you're a fan of flavored whiskeys, you might enjoy this. It's about 70 proof and has a basic whiskey base, and then an infusion of natural ginger flavor. On the upside, it is not overly sweet, which is my big problem with a lot of flavored whiskeys. So I suppose this could make a good mixer, but personally, there just isn't enough whiskey or ginger flavor to this. I would much rather grab a really hearty rye and then mix it with a really snappy ginger beer. This just isn't working for me. Which means I'm just going to have to drink the rest of my orphan barrel rhetoric. Cheers, y'all. So there's something that I've said before, but it's really worth repeating. One of the worst parts about dating a musician is that the person never really goes away. It's true. Because no matter where you are, what you're doing, their music can always pop up when you least expect it. And then you're left with either a fond memory or the urge to invest in a flamethrower. And less so, but still, for me, you could say the same thing about directors. Or at least one director in particular. For this story, I will call him Orson. I didn't actually set out to date him. It was quite the contrary, really. I mean, I had enough problems with the musicians in my life. I didn't want to add someone from the film industry to my dating arsenal because that just seemed like more trouble than it was worth. Still, people have a very funny way of inserting themselves into your life, especially when you're living in Los Angeles. I had been there for about 2 years when I met Orson, and my starry bloom hadn't quite rubbed off yet, even despite not really having any steady work. I felt hopeful and excited still, and I even genuinely believed that some of the temp gigs that I had might lead to something more. And this was my thought when I signed up with an agency who brokered talent for trade shows. Now, I admit, when I first heard the term trade show talent, I was definitely skeptical. It really just seemed like a thin subterfuge for hiring out the less affectionately known booth bitch. But the agency that I signed up with assured me that the companies, and especially tech companies, wanted actors who could serve as sort of first-level salespeople and not just as bait. And just to establish their credibility, the application process for the so-called trade show talent was more rigorous than some of the corporate gigs I've taken. I mean, I had to submit a headshot, pass computer proficiency, personality, and drug tests before I could even show up for an audition. The whole process was so intensive and annoying, I almost quit halfway through. Until I learned that I stood to make $50 an hour if I was hired. Which I was, eventually, by a software company who would be launching a new product at Showbiz Expo. Now, Showbiz Expo was, and for all I know may still be, the biggest trade show for the entertainment industry. Every hack and hero in Hollywood came out for it, whether as a buyer or a vendor. The whole thing really acted like part cattle call and part film premiere. It was both decadent and pathetically hopeful at once. And then there was me, wearing a corporate polo shirt that was deliberately given to me 2 sizes too small, a skirt the size of a dishcloth, and a paid-by-the-hour smile. My job was to stand at the perimeter of my company's booth and greet people, answer basic questions, and qualify whether a person was an actual customer or just someone looking for a freebie. It was harder work than I anticipated. It was, because aside from needing to learn the company's entire software catalog over breakfast, for 10 hours, I had to smile and be personable. Two things which I definitely do not relish doing. And I'll tell y'all, if there ever was an upscale version of hooking, this is it. I mean, sure, I had been thoroughly vetted, and I was expected to speak knowledgeably, but come on. The only thing separating me and the showgirls 2 booths over was a thin layer of cotton knit. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mind. I mean, that's what I signed up for. I just resented the whole pretense of it. Especially when the porn producers came sniffing around. Oh, Lord, they were insidious. Because they look like everyone else. So I'd be spitting out my canned sales pitch until the business card came out and I would know these guys were not interested in buying software. And God help me, every motherfucking porn producer in Los Angeles had the same goddamn business card. Oh, they resembled mud flaps. The guy's name would be sprawled across the top, followed by his empty title, and then accompanied by the silhouette of a naked chick. I mean, really classy stuff here, y'all. And every time I was handed one of these treats, I had to make a show of keeping it, because I was forbidden to turn down any business cards. Instead, I was supposed to pocket them, even the slimy ones, and then hand them in to the sales manager at the end of the day. So I was 2 days in and boobs deep in oily porn creatures when Orson, that director, approached the booth. I had no clue who he was, but he had to be somebody considering how quickly my boss shoved me out of the way to get at him. And I do mean shove. He plants his hand on my shoulder and then knocks me aside so aggressively, I go sailing right into a display. And I wind up legs up and buried in a pile of software boxes. And of course, this is all my fault. My boss is apologizing to Orson for my clumsiness, and all the while he's muttering, "Get your shit together," to me under his breath. Fortunately, Orson seems to be a decent guy, and he comes to my aid, grabbing my hand and pulling me to my feet. And then once I get all dusted off and everything, he looks at me and he says, "Who might you be?" Seeing that Orson is interested in me, my boss is suddenly far more concerned about my well-being. And he introduces me as being one of his brightest young sales associates. Ugh. I snort, right, and I say, "Really, dude? I think you mean booth bitch." Because, y'all, I could handle a lot of indignity for a paycheck, but the second it got physical, whether it was intentional or not, I was out. And I was done working for this guy. So I grabbed my purse from under the counter and I stomp off as fast as my heels would allow. And I thought that would be the end of it, but Orson actually came running after me to apologize. He says, "Look, I feel like this is somehow my fault, so how about letting me make it up to you?" Now, Orson seems sincere enough, and by that time I've figured out who he is, but I can't say that I trust him entirely. So I take out that stack of porn cards that I had collected that day, and I fan them out in front of him, and I say, "Dude, if I want to get screwed, I have plenty of options already." Orson starts laughing then, and he says, "I promise it's not like that." And then he invites me to accompany him to the expo after-party the next night. "Your call," he says. "I can have a car pick you up, or you can meet me there." It's an interesting idea. So I pause for a moment, and I do a quick stranger danger assessment. Orson looks clean and well-dressed. He didn't have meth mouth or coke shakes. I can't see any real reason to decline. So I say, "All right, pick me up at 7. True to his word, Orson had a car waiting for me at my shitty valley apartment the next night. He wasn't in it, which seemed a little bit odd, But the driver explained that he'd be meeting me at the party. I have to admit, y'all, it felt surreal and kind of spectacular to be arriving at a Hollywood party in a rather posh town car. The driver gives Orson's name at the first checkpoint. Then, as he pulls up to the main entrance, he gives me instructions. He says, "I've already given your name to security, so all you have to do is walk up the carpet, then head inside. Don't talk to anyone. An escort will take you to Orson." Don't talk to anyone? That's weird. It seems like a needlessly specific and kind of complicated way to meet a date, but he doesn't really give me any time to consider it, because the next thing I know, the driver is opening my door and depositing me on that carpet. It was the reddest goddamn carpet I have ever seen. And even though every single camera that was flanking it just stopped flashing the moment I stood up and they realized that I was no one, I still walked the hell out of that thing. As expected, there was an escort waiting to walk me back to Orson. He was standing in a group of people, all of whom I recognized, and then he waved when he saw me approaching. He places a small air kiss in the general vicinity of my cheek, hands me a cocktail, and then introduces me to the group. It's also pleasant and polite that, I gotta say, I actually felt a little out of place. I mean, hell, to that point, I was used to brawling rock star events, where you knew enough to never stand under a balcony unless you wanted to get smashed by errant furniture taking flight. But this was so different. I mean, it was all so perfectly formal and upstanding. And as the evening goes on, I start to wonder if maybe I should make this my new crowd. People were nice, they were intelligent, and Orson was handsome and charming. Although I will say, he would move away every time I tried to put my hand on his arm. But I figured it's all right, because he's not also trying to convince me to make out with him in a used bathroom stall. I thought maybe this is normal. I'm thinking, I could get used to this kind of night. And that, of course, is exactly when my rosy bloom was about to be rubbed out. The chick who brought me into the event approaches me then and says, "Orson's car is waiting for me." So I ask her, "Will he be in it?" She doesn't respond, she just motions for me to follow her. I scan the room looking for Orson because I'm starting to feel like I'm a kid being shooed away from the grown-ups table. Unfortunately, I can't see him anywhere, so I'm forced to follow his lackey. We leave the party, and I see that we're walking down a side hallway away from the main entrance. And this creeps me out. I'm all, "Whoa there, chickie. I am not going anywhere until you tell me what's up." I reach into my purse for my mini bottle of pepper spray because I will blind a broad if I have to. The chick just rolls her eyes and she sighs because clearly she is exasperated and has done this 100 times before. She says, "Calm down. We're just walking to the side exit away from the press." I continue following her, but I haven't dropped my pepper spray just yet. I don't know what exactly I'm expecting to happen, but I can't shake the thought that something is up. And of course, I was right. When we reach the exit, the chick pulls a ream of paper from her clipboard and hands it to me. She says, "If you would like Orson to join you in the car, you'll need to sign this first." The papers feel all crisp and warm as I take them, as if they were just fresh out of a printer. I scan the first page and I realize she just handed me a non-disclosure agreement. What the fuck? My shock must have registered on my face because that little legal flunkie, she takes patronizing pity on me and she says, "Oh, honey, you didn't think this was a real date, did you?" My face just flushes and gets all hot, exposing that, like an idiot, I did indeed think it was a date. And that is when all of the little oddities of the night started to make sense. The solo red carpet walk, avoiding my touch, the just right distance. It all added up precisely to plausible deniability. Until that moment. Although the word sex was never used, it was clear that was the intention. I suppose I passed some sort of unwitting audition in the party. Now, let me be very clear here. I wasn't mad, and I'm still not upset about the fact that he gave me an NDA. I mean, it made sense. I don't blame Orson for wanting that kind of protection. I mean, the guy potentially had a lot to lose, and he wasn't going to risk it on some random booth bitch from Showbiz Expo. But that's just it. Orson didn't know me. And as I scanned the multiple pages outlining all of the rights I was about to give up for what may or may not be a night of sex, I knew it wasn't for me. I went home alone that night, and I did not hear from Orson again. And my friends at the time, they all thought I was fucking crazy for turning Orson down. But here's the thing. No matter what could have happened between us, whether it was over one night, a week, or hell, maybe even for years, I would never, ever be comfortable living up to the pretense dictated by a director and a clipboard full of legal papers. I'm just not that kind of booth bitch. Cheers, y'all. Hey, y'all, I want to make mention of one quick thing here. If you enjoy my boozy stories, how would you feel about buying me a drink? Because you can. We've set up a quick, simple, and absolutely painless way that you can donate to The Unwritable Rant. Just go to theunwritablerant.com and click on the little icon that says Buy Me a Drink. I promise y'all, this is not a subscription. It's not like Patreon. It's just a one-time donation through PayPal. And it's all up to you what you want to give. Because it takes a lot of booze to keep these stories flowing. So y'all, if you can help, if you want to buy me a drink, I would be really, really thankful. So speaking of movies and directors and whatnot, I saw the new Jurassic World movie recently. And although I didn't really like the movie, I have to admit, I have affection for the Jurassic Park series. It's one of those movie franchises that seems just plausible enough to almost wish it would happen. And really, I've had a thing for dinosaurs since I was a kid. Especially since I happened to once find one. Surprisingly, there was indeed a time in my life when things like my hair and the condition of my clothing didn't affect the course of my day. It was my own paleo-ornamentum period, I suppose. And it was in this short span when my dad and I used to go on fossil digs with Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. I'm fairly confident that my parents started taking me to the museum immediately following my birth. Even with all of the technology and exhibit changes it's seen over the years, the building itself feels as familiar to me as my own home. You see, my dad, the physicist, was a consultant there on an exhibit once. So I spent a lot of time wandering the halls after hours and becoming intimately familiar with every bone and gem and display. Even after his contract ended, my dad regularly received all sorts of invitations to museum events. But the fossil digs were my favorite. They usually happened toward the end of July when summer was firmly established and school still felt years and years away. My dad and I would wake up early on Saturday morning and head to the field, where a chartered bus would haul us and several paleontologists and other museum members about 50 miles southwest of Chicago to Mazon Creek. Once upon a time, and by that I mean a good 300 million years ago, Mazon Creek was a swampy coastline thriving during the Carboniferous Age. The area was strip-mined for coal in the 20th century, and the land is now considered one of the richest fossil sites in the world. To me, going to Mazon Creek was the closest I would ever come to journey to the center of the earth. On that very first ride there, I pictured lush mountains and deep caverns and caves just full of dinosaurs that only I would be keen enough to discover. Clearly, the topography of Illinois was a bit lost on me then, so You can imagine my staggering disappointment to find that Mazon Creek looked more like a dusty riverbank than a primordial wonderland. Sure, there were some hills, but they were mostly made from crumbling shale. They certainly didn't look like anything Indiana Jones would give much thought to. Because that's who I wanted to be back then. I wanted to scour the earth for relics of another world, maybe fight a few bad guys, and change history with my discoveries. The only bad guys at Mazon Creek were mosquitoes, and those pesky little fuckers were aggressive. Fortunately, my dad had more sense than me, and hosed me down with a bottle of DEET before sending me off to explore. God, the 80s were the best, they were. I didn't have a helmet, I wasn't wearing padding, there were no water bottles. It was all, here's your hammer, kid, go have fun. Most of the people that were on the dig stayed near the creek, choosing to look for fossils in the soft ground. But me, I had my eye on a large shale hill. It stood at the far end of a weedy path and looked like my best bet for fossils and adventure. Maybe it was just a trick of my imagination, but as I stood at the base of that hill, it seemed way higher than it had from a distance. I wasn't an especially athletic kid, and Lord knows I never responded to dares. But when it came to personal challenges, when it was just me against me, I was all in. I don't know what exactly I expected to find at the top of that hill. Perhaps the bones of a T-Rex. I just knew that I wanted to climb it. Indiana Jones wouldn't have turned back, and neither would I. Now, really, the hill wasn't especially steep. It's not like I was going to have to scale it like a spider monkey, but it wasn't an easy climb either. I got about halfway up when I started to feel a little out of breath and a little bit anxious. I catch sight of my dad, who's standing at the base. He's got a bucket that's already full of potential fossils, and he's watching me very closely. And he calls out, "Going all the way to the top, huh?" I shake my head and I say, "Nope, I think I'm going to come down now." My dad could have let me climb back down. It certainly would have been the safe thing to do. But he says, "I bet there's some cool fossils up there. Keep going." In reality, I probably only had about 5 or 6 more feet to go, but to a kid who's getting a little panicky, that may as well have been miles. The hill is incredibly crumbly, and my keds definitely were not cut out for the brittle ground. But I keep going, making one small move after another. And in the background, I hear my dad saying, "You're almost there. You've got this." I'm not entirely sure I do, but I can see the summit just up ahead. And it's not long before I'm able to miraculously pull myself to the top. My dad is cheering and applauding from below, and I realize, holy crap, I did it. And I'm thinking, hell yeah, this is awesome. Until I'm struck by the jarring reality, I have no clue how to get back down. My dad is still cheering from the base when I look down and I yell, "I think I'm stuck up here." But my dad, always my biggest supporter, he starts laughing and he says, "Don't worry about coming down. Just have fun. Look around. I will help you down when you are ready." The surface is uneven and awkward, but I suck up my panic and I start to look around for potential fossils. I can hear the Indiana Jones theme music return to my head as I crouch down and gently dig through the loose layers of shale. Of course, there was zero likelihood of me finding actual dinosaur bones. In reality, most of the fossils at Mazon Creek are found inside these little rounded nodules of iron carbonate. And all you would need is your rock hammer to kind of crack that thing open and reveal preserved fern leaves or shrimp or maybe even the famed Tully monster. I'm up there for about half an hour or so when I find something. It's a perfectly smooth nodule, about the size of my hand, and just barely peeking out from under a pile of shale along the edge. I want it. I have no way of knowing if there's actually a fossil in there. For all I knew, it was fossilized bird crap, but it looked right. And of course, there's that damn theme music in my head again, so I decide I'm going to try and dig this thing out. I discover it's more deeply rooted in the ground than I had anticipated. So I kind of sit myself down next to it, and I start to carefully loosen the ground around it. Now, this time my dad is slowly making his way up a hill, coming up along the same side that I'm now sitting on. The ground is barely wet, and I find it's giving away fairly easily as I dig. And the nodule starts to loosen, and I pull on it. And just as I give it a really good tug, the ground just gives way from beneath me. Shale and rocks and loose dirt crumble under my weight, and they send me sailing down the side of the hill in a wild landslide. It was so sudden, I don't even register what's happening. I just see the bottom coming up way quicker than I anticipated. And I'm trying to brace myself with my feet, but the ground under me won't stop moving. And all of a sudden, I am sailing past my dad, who's yelling, "Cover your head, just cover your head." And it's funny, really, because I had been practicing duck and cover for so long in school and tornado drills that the action didn't really have any meaning to me. I mean, I'd been doing it for play, not survival. But as I am riding down the side of a hill in a pile of rocks, I suddenly understood the value of it. I mean, those rocks are just crackling around me. I can feel them tumbling down behind me. It was insane. Finally, the hill just kind of spits me out on the ground where I continue to half skid and half roll and come to this dirty, messy stop. I expect myself to be dying. I do. That's my first thought. I'm dead. But I do a quick check and I find that my jeans and my dad's long-sleeved shirt that I'd been wearing had protected me from the worst of the rocky slide. So aside from some bruises, I was okay. In fact, I was thrilled because somehow, through that entire rocky slip and slide, I had managed to hang on to that one carbonite nodule that I had picked from the top. My dad runs and expects to find me a bloody pulp. Instead, I'm sitting there tapping on my precious hunk of earth with my rock hammer, gently coaxing it open. And I'm thinking, it's gotta be something. I was meant to make this discovery. The nodule splits open fairly easily. This is it. This is my moment of prehistoric triumph. I look into one half and I am sure that I'm going to see some sort of bone or tooth or something amazing staring back at me. Instead, I see a long, squiggly, booger-like shape. What the hell? I'm so annoyed that I am ready to chuck that thing into the creek. I'm disgusted. I went through all that just to pick up some sort of turd. But my dad leans over and he grabs it. And he says, "Let's ask the real scientists what this is." So we take what I am confident is nothing more than a preserved weed or dog crap over to the paleontologists. The one guy looks at the fossil and he gets very, very quiet. He calls another guy over, and the two of them are hunched over this rock. They grab a magnifying glass and they're whispering back and forth about jaws and joints. So my dad asks, "What is it?" Their answer? It's a worm. Y'all, I fell down the side of a hill for a fucking worm. I do not look impressed when they say this. And neither does my dad until they explain. I had found a perfect museum-quality fossil of an Escanites zealous, a jointed worm that was so well preserved you could see its jaw and teeth. They hand me the magnifying glass and I take a closer look at it, and oh my God, you totally can see its jaws and teeth. It's crazy. Suddenly, that stupid rock is starting to seem a little bit more interesting. The paleontologists invited us to donate it to the museum. Apparently, they were in the process of curating an exhibit about the Mazon Creek and thought that it would be the perfect addition. And there's that theme music in my head again. And I'm thinking, wow, this is my Indiana Jones moment. But I look up at my dad and he gives me a very subtle shake of the head. And I think, okay, my dad knows what he's doing. So I decline. And to this day, I'm really glad I did. I may not have fallen into a secret volcano chamber or wrestled the Ark of the Covenant away from Nazis, but I had still found my very own dinosaur. Sure, it was a worm and not, a raptor or something, but I named him Zeus. And to this day, he lives in a cabinet in my parents' living room. I'm really proud of him. And I'll tell you, considering the teeth on that thing, I'm hoping that if dinosaurs ever come back, I do not meet him face to face. Cheers, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast, y'all. If you want to listen to back episodes of this show, or find my YouTube channel, or connect with me on social media, you can find all the links you need on theunwritablerant.com. And if there is a specific bourbon or whiskey that you'd like me to taste on the show, I'd love to hear about it. Just send me a note and I'll look for it. And now, y'all, I'm going to take off and enjoy this perfectly sunny day. Hope you have a great week. I'll be back next Sunday to share some more bourbon-soaked stories. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablerant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter @MorningNeurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, a couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton, hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.